Okay, so Karen, could you please confirm if my screen is sharing? I think it's holding on this side. So just to be sure that you're seeing my screen. Hi, Karen.
Yes, Cyprus, your screen is sharing.
Right. Okay. All right. Once again, thank you all for joining the call today, and welcome everyone for this session. Like I'd said, the session is going to be recorded. So if you're not comfortable to having your face on the recorded, please feel free to turn off your camera. My name is Cyprus Ochieng. I'm a research associate at GAMOS East Africa, supporting MECS program initiatives here in Kenya, and convening these dialogues is one of those initiatives that MECS is supporting here in Kenya. For the session today, I'm going to be joined by my colleague Karen Atieno from Kijani Testing. She's also going to support the moderation of this session. On your screen, this is our program for the day. So as it looks now, we're going to be having an introduction session, which I'm already doing. And then we'll have a session where we'll be joined by our colleagues from 4RD Digital, who will be presenting a pilot report that they had done in collaboration with MECS. And then thereafter, we'll have another session for panel discussion, involving some of the stakeholders here in Kenya who are working within the IoT space for the eCooking appliances, and also one of the very enduring entrepreneur in the eCooking space, and then followed by a Q&A session, and then we'll close the session for the day. So for the sake of the new members who are joining this call, I'm very sure Paul is joining us for the first time. This is an e-community of practice. So we are a group of stakeholders from the clean cooking space and also the electricity access space. So we are trying to bring these two sectors together through these convenings just to help us develop the Kenya's e-cooking sector. So these convenings is usually supported by MECS program, like I'd said, but we also have co-conveners who are supporting us in terms of putting this process together. So we have GAMOS East Africa, where I work for, and then we have the African Center for Technology Studies, and then Kenya Power, a utility company here in Kenya. And then there's Clean Cooking Association of Kenya that coordinates all the clean cooking sectoral stakeholders in the Kenyan space. And then we have Access Coalition. So the e-cooking community of practice also has a WhatsApp group, which at the moment we have over 700 members. And these members are from the policy makers. Some of them are development partners. We have members from the research space, academia, utility providers, and we also have entrepreneurs and private sectors. So I will share the link to the YouTube channel that I've talked about, where we usually share some of these convenings, most of these convenings, not some. And then I'll also share let me go back. I'll also share the link to the WhatsApp group on the chat section. So for today, our dialogue is going to be focusing on data-driven e-cooking, and we are going to be hearing from Paul and Nora on some of the insights that they gathered from the Smart Metered Electric Pressure Cooker for domestic use study they did here in Kenya. This study was supported by MECS here in Kenya, and there's really some very interesting insights that are coming out of that report that we thought was useful for the team to share with the Kenyan community, especially now that a lot of the e-cooking entrepreneurs are looking into involving themselves involving in carbon-related projects. So it is important that they understand how can they generate data that is has some sort of integrity that is verifiable, and also just to understand some of the dynamics that comes with the using IoT-enabled EPCs. So from their study, then we'll be able to understand some of the insights that they were able to gather from that particular pilot. And then that is the reason we are also having the second session, where we are going to be hearing from some of the providers that we have in Kenya at the moment, and also an entrepreneur who is also has been distributing some of the appliances that are IoT enabled, what our experience is, and how that looks like. So at this juncture, I don't want to delve deeper into what that report entails. So I would like to give the floor to Paul and Nora to take us through the presentation. And as they do that, can we also just introduce ourselves on the chat? And please leave your questions and any comments you have for the presenters. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cypros, and good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thanks to the Gamos team and to the MECS team for having us. So my name is Nora Bergin. I'm a senior program manager with 4R Digital, working across our portfolio of projects. And of course, I'm joined by my colleague, Paul, who you'll be hearing from in a minute, who is our hardware product manager. Cypros, do you have our slides, or shall I pull them up?
I have them. I just wanted to put your profile up so that when you introduce yourself, everyone else can also just see that. So I don't know if you want Paul to introduce himself before I go to your slides. Or,
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Paul, please.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. I'm again echoing Nora's thanks very much for everyone joining and for Cypros for pulling all this together. So Paul Conroy, I'm hardware product owner in 4RD. Have had 10 years of experience in global manufacturing, as it says on the slide. And my little party trick is being business fluent in Mandarin Chinese, which is fairly entertaining most of the time listening to an Irish guy speak Chinese. But I'll pass back to Nora.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm skipping the other presenters because we'll introduce them during that other session. So please pardon us. All right. Go on, Nora.
Okay, thanks so much. So just before we dive into the content of our paper, I'll briefly introduce 4R Digital for those who don't know us. So we're a technical services company, and fundamentally we focus on two things. The first is, can we connect using IoT digital assets for the purpose of monitoring those assets? And we also have deep experience in microfinance and digital payments. And so we work on a whole range of concepts related to those two ideas. Can we link monitoring of digital activity to microfinance? And so for the purpose of this exercise, we know this community is particularly interested in how data can be collected for the purpose of accessing climate finance. That is something that we have thought deeply about over the past 4 years, and what we're moving sort of closer to in this pilot. And Paul will talk us through the kind of technical elements of the pilot today and what we learned, but just to give you a brief overview of the scope. So earlier this year, we were able to deploy 95 low-cost smart plugs into the market in Kenya. These were deployed to household users of electric pressure cookers. And fundamentally, the pilot tested two things. One, could these smart plugs allow us to collect the data that we wanted to collect? And Paul will talk about that in great detail. And two, were the customers willing to adopt and use these smart plugs alongside their EPCs on an ongoing basis? And we'll talk about some of our findings there as well. And then, of course, this solution that we utilized in the pilot, it's not a commercially scalable, viable solution, but we are moving in that direction. So we'll talk about our plans for taking this work forward and how we hope it can be kind of taken up by the wider community. But I'll let Paul dive straight in. Let's go to the next slide.
Thanks, Nora. So what we were focused on, and what MECS, in collaboration with MECS, what they aimed at was a commercially scalable solution. what we had worked on through an initial phase with MECS was a GSM solution, and we were finding that through the hardware and ongoing running costs of a GSM solution, it was proving more expensive, or that's what we found with regards to the cook stove itself. So what we envisaged was effectively an off-the-shelf smart plug, customized in a way that allowed us to get a secure data stream from each of the plugs. In this initial trial, and we'll talk a bit more about that through the course of the slides, we then deployed a Safaricom GSM dongle. Because of the generic form factor of the smart plug, any appliance could be plugged into it. So you needed to have the ability to know that the usage was from a smart plug and not from another appliance. So we did in this case deploy a Safaricom GSM dongle with each of the deployments, and then that was connected to a standard EPC. The purpose was to test alternatives for GSM solutions to see if that smart plug could detect energy usage reliably and assess its technical feasibility, whether users were happy with that solution. As Nora mentioned, we deployed initially 95 plugs in 2 locations, Katsabeth and Athayo. And then we, halfway through the trial, we then tested an alternative manufacturer of the smart plugs. So we deployed an additional 25. That was based on learnings from the initial deployment and just to get a better feel of different manufacturers and what they may have had to offer. If you can move over to the next slide, please. So this is some of the photos. At the initial stage, because of the volumes that we were looking at, we ended up doing the firmware and calibration of the plugs initially before they were deployed into the field, and put a little bit of labeling on it to give us an idea of each of the plugs. So each of the plugs were programmed with its own individual identity, so we could know exactly which plug was communicating which piece of data. And then our colleagues in Kenya went and deployed the plugs alongside one of our partners into the various locations into the customer households, which is the photo on the right-hand side. Next slide. So through the process of the trial, we got some really fantastic data. Over the 6-month period, we ended up with about 330,000 data points from the plugs. So that was a mix of the old and new devices. And as you can see on the graph here, you can identify the old devices and new devices. They were very much similar in their data sets. And what this is showing is effectively your usage, which is around the 4 amps and apparent power of 1,000. The variance then coming particularly from the different voltages we were seeing in the field. But what we were able to do was then train a data model that was identifying cooking events as opposed to non-cooking events. Which is a very positive. Effectively, what we ended up doing, and this is outlined in more detail in the report itself, was that we were able to positively identify cooking events through the data obtained. Connectivity was a concern within the trial. What we ended up in the initial stages, we suffered quite a bit from the reliability of the Kenyan grid. Some of the plugs ended up resetting themselves as part of the process because they were resetting. In fact, in one case, one of the plugs that didn't reset over a weekend had turned on and off about 600 times. Because of the power coming on and off during a storm in Athayo, I think it was. So a difficult environment. What we also found was that customers were, despite kind of being reassured about the cost being covered, which was very low, As soon as they saw an LED light on the device, they believed that that was using a lot of energy. So their immediate thing was to unplug the devices. That ended up losing the connectivity between the smart plug and the GSM dongle, which was another kind of source of issue with getting the data back. But generally, we were able to get data, certainly in those initial stages, to prove cooking events. If you could move over to the next slide, please. So you will see there was 2 interesting outliers to this out of the 120 we ended up deploying in the field. 2 quite interesting outliers. So what we ended up realizing, and this was one of the things I suppose you don't think, or certainly I wouldn't have thought about in the deployment, was that typically your households will only have 1 or 2 plugs. And therefore us then consuming those plugs with 1 dongle and a smart plug meant that customers, it wasn't ideal for a lot of customers. So what we ended up doing was deploying an extension lead as part of the trial. What we believe occurred with device 69 and device 97 is that the customers moved the smart plug from the EPC over to the end of the extension lead, and then ended up powering multiple devices at the same time, which is where you then start to see current of 8 amps or up to 12 amps in the device 97, which is not expected with an EPC. You would only expect to see roughly around 4 amps during the cooking phase of the cooker. So yeah, we were able to identify those outliers and misbehaving devices, as we nickname them, through the process. Next slide. Thank you. So technical challenges. So we had the generic nature of the plug that was then susceptible to different energy usage. So that necessitated the need for a constant data stream. The Kenyan grid was very unstable, which led to the initial problems. We did some firmware updates, which we were able to do remotely to the plug that prevented some of those issues. But we still suffered. There was a couple of plugs, and that's being actively looked at with the manufacturers at the moment to see what we can do to fix those issues for the future. We did see a lot of customers, even within a couple of hours of enumerators going and talking them through the solution. We saw a number of customers almost immediately unplug the devices out of concern of energy usage. The LEDs were quite distracting. They were something children were interested in, so they would be prone to start interacting with the devices, which isn't ideal. On the positive side, the cost of the hardware and the ongoing running costs proved attractive. We're looking at a solution that is sub $10 from a hardware perspective, and then the ongoing running costs is something you're able to mitigate by using either local champions or enumerators to collect data. The generic form factor was a positive, because then you're not restricting yourself to a solution that is specifically designed for each EPC variant. And then the reception to the technology was generally positive. People were interested in learning more. They were interested in their cooking habits, interested in how much energy usage they were getting. And there was a generally, despite the problems we did experience, we didn't have anyone that was against the idea of understanding more and looking for the benefits of using eCooking, which was a great positive. Next slide, please. Sorry, Cypros. Next slide, please.
Swali ya kijani imerudi. So
That's all right, no problem.
the salary again.
That's great. Thank you very much. So as I mentioned, no problem at all. It's great. So as I mentioned, you know, client reception was very positive to the trial. Our teams did have to do a couple of visits in the process, which was more than we initially intended. But generally speaking, the reception to the process was very, very good. They were happy to, so we did a baseline survey and an endline survey as part of that process to try and gauge reception and user interactions. And despite all of those elements, people were generally happy with the process. As I mentioned, we did a survey with each of the customers, which was generally well received. There was reported health improvements and health improvements, reduced meal plan prep time, and lowered cooking costs through those survey results. Very much backed up with the data, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. What we've very much learned from this process is trying to keep things simple. We've learned that the more devices that are being deployed and the more complexity you introduce to the process, the more pitfalls you tend to find yourself in. So certainly any future stage would look to get rid of the necessity for the GSM dongle and just reduce the clutter in a customer's household by also looking to secure the device in some manner. Certainly getting rid of any sort of indication that there is additional energy usage, so any LEDs, any screens, things like that are important to look to remove. And then see if we can leverage, so any clients that may have a smartphone, look to then leverage that smartphone for either data collection or data display to customers rather than screens, because the overwhelming result demonstrated that people are concerned, as they should be, or as they are probably prone to concern of additional energy usage. So certainly keeping things simple in any future solution, less interaction or as little as interaction as possible with the clients, and then it's their choice whether they want to interact further or not. And the next slide, please. So I think we got to the point where this was it was a genuinely positive trial, and we got some fantastic data from it. We got to the point where, with some technical challenges and some next steps in that phase leading up to a phase 3, we can see the viability of this solution, and we're now working our way through ideas collectively with the MECS team on understanding how you would implement that for a next phase. Ideally then getting rid of the necessity for a constant connectivity, which proved difficult, and that's where the commercially scalable scenario comes into it. The ideal situation here is that you are only deploying a smart plug, which has its very low cost in hardware and very little ongoing running costs, except for the data collection, which could be then periodic based on requirement. But you're getting rid of the need for an ongoing monthly fee that is unfortunately attributed to GSM. we're currently working with manufacturers to identify, and there is some very positive work already being done or has been done into investigating the hardware issues we experienced in phase 2. And that's that kind of bottom left section. We're looking at refining, gaining approval potentially for that next phase, de-risk the solution in terms of testing and making sure that we have addressed those issues, particularly then from the client perspective as well. Are we addressing and getting rid of the, like, for example, the LEDs? It's a simple thing to get rid of, but not something we would have considered as part of the phase 2 approach. And then roll out to what we would consider commercially scalable. I think that's it. Have I missed anything, Nora?
No, that's great. Yeah, and of course there is a lot more detail captured in our report, and I hope everyone has access to that.
Yeah, thank you, Paul and Nora, for that presentation. I think, as we had said, this is going to help us set the scene for the next session, for us to engage with what you've presented and also what the other stakeholders' perspective is around this topic. So I would like for us to go straight away to the next session. We will have a session for the Q&A, so please feel free to post your questions on the chat.
Thank you so much, Paul and Nora, for that insightful presentation.
So you can take up the next session as we proceed here.
And so we'll move on to our next session, as Cyprus has highlighted. My name is Karen Atieno. I work for Kijani Testing Limited. At Kijani, basically, we do lab testing, field testing, technical support, circularity, and market testing of PV appliances. I work here as the team lead, laboratory work, that is product testing and product development, as well as test method development. Of interest to the ongoing discussion is that Kijani, in partnership with GAMOS, we are currently undertaking a study on field and lab testing of IoT-enabled appliances, with the hope that the data that we get from this will help us to have pathways within which these appliances can be integrated into the KPLC billing system, and also at the end of it, come up with a test method for IoT-enabled appliances similar to or close to what Verasol has for testing EPCs, that was also co-authored by Kijani, but in this case for IoT-enabled appliances. So before we go into the discussion, Nora and Paul have introduced themselves. And so next on our panel is Ian Mutai. Ian works next, Ian Mutai, who has over 12 years experience in software development, and he's the Chief Technology Officer at Vast Carbon, driving design and deployment of transformative digital systems in the Africa's emerging carbon market. Ian also has worked in implementing the Kenya National Carbon Registry under the Ministry of Energy, guiding technical architecture and also in compliance with Article 6. He holds an MSc in Information Systems and Technology and a BSc in Computer Software Engineering, alongside other professional certifications. Also on our panel is Dorothy, who is this founder and CEO of Reliably Impact, an enterprise that seeks to accelerate electric cooking in the rural areas. Up next on our is the CEO and founder of PowerPay and Green Innovation Ventures Enterprise Limited, Mr. Geoffrey Mburu. So those are part of our panel, the panel team we are having for this afternoon. And so we will go straight up into the discussion. And I'd like to pick it up from what Paul and Nora have said from the study and the observations they had made. And so this is to you, Paul and Nora. In the course of your study, from the discussion, you have highlighted that the issue of cost kept coming on from time to time, and you had to sort of do a reassurance to the participants that it was not going to consume much in terms of cost, the study. And so if you could delve in probably a little deeper into other lessons probably you picked in terms of user perceptions, issues of affordability, and also willingness to transition from the use of traditional fuels to e-cooking. Probably some highlights on those areas that came up in the course of the study that you are doing.
Paul, shall I jump in on this one?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for the question. Well, it's worth highlighting. So we were very lucky to work with partners Bidhasasa on this pilot, and that team has vast experience in, of course, the sale of EPCs and training customers on use and adoption of EPCs. So I want to call out their expertise and how important that was to the success of the pilot. But particularly in relation to the dongle and the smart plug, yeah, that was certainly a new element for the customers. And I think from our team's perspective, and we worked closely with Bidhasasa team to ensure that there was sufficient training for the customers to make sure they understood what we were doing, why we were doing it, and kind of the role that the smart plug would play during the 6-month pilot. As Paul already pointed out, yeah, we did see perhaps some maybe not negative perceptions, but sort of people being a little bit uncertain around how that smart plug might contribute to energy expenditure in the home. And throughout the pilot, we did see people, stop using those smart plugs. However, through the surveying that we were able to do at the base and end line, on the whole, we saw a hugely positive reaction to adoption of the EPC. And that is promising. And so even though in some instances we thought, oh, we're not actually getting data being reported from this EPC, and that might make us question whether or not people are adopting the EPCs, the survey data told a different story. And actually, we realized that there probably was additional work to be done in terms of ensuring that customers really understand that the smart plug is not, consuming additional energy. And in fact, that is a huge component that is informing our thinking in terms of phase 3. How can we address some of the fundamental challenges that the customers had with the smart plugs themselves. So as Paul already mentioned, there was a green light that came on in the smart plug that might have indicated to the customer, perhaps we hadn't thought about it, but that might have indicated to the customer a power consumption. And those are things that we think we can address with a shifted form factor, which is what we'll be working towards in the next phase. Paul, anything you want to add to that?
No, that's fine. That's great.
Okay. Thank you for that, Nora. So would you say, probably just to iterate a bit, would you say that the issue with the dongle smart plugs could have brought forth an issue that would have prohibited the usage or the uptake of the technology at that time of the study?
So yeah, I would say that this study was as much about understanding customer reactions to use of the smart plug in the dongle as it was about the viability of collecting the data we wanted to collect through the smart plug and dongle. And so we had great success in terms of collecting of the data. We saw positive adoption of the EPC, both through the data we were able to collect, but also through the survey responses from the customers, and of course through direct feedback from Bidhasasa's team. But fundamentally, we did see some challenges with customers kind of understanding and adopting the smart plugs on an ongoing basis. And so that is something that we think we can iterate and solve for kind of at a scale solution.
Okay.
I think
Thank you for that.
just to add a little bit. So fundamentally, I think they certainly weren't against the additional hardware. I think it was just because it was in a scenario where it was something interesting, it was something new, and the ability for people, human nature says that once there's something new and interesting in a household, people will be attracted to it and want to mess with it is probably not the right term, but take it out, look at it, play with it, things like that. And that unfortunately did contribute to a loss in data, because people had taken it away. They may have forgotten to then plug it back in. That then contributed to the dongle and smart plug ending up losing connectivity between each other. That is again something we were looking into, but it's not part of a scalable solution. So it's we did find that marriage between the dongle and the smart plug to be difficult to maintain. And yeah, that unfortunately caused us a lot of issues. But yeah, going forward, we would look to solve for that so that we could address it, and then customers aren't in that position to tamper with the devices going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Nora and Paul, for the clarification. And probably this is to Dorothy. You're currently working with Vast Carbon to deploy IoT-enabled EPCs, especially to scale eCooking in the rural areas, of course, with collaboration with MECS. And from your observation or from the ongoing field tests or the consumers you're working with, what have you learned from the data you're collecting so far, that is in terms of usage patterns, consumer behaviors, energy consumption, and probably any other thing that comes up that would go directly into the uptake of e-cooking appliances?
Thank you so much, Karen, for that question. Yes, Nyalore Impact has been distributing electric pressure cookers, and we started this journey of embedding an IoT into our devices in 2023. And it's until 2024 that we managed to get our first products digitalized through Vast Carbon. And the data that we have collected so far, we have managed to see usage. Most households are using the pressure cooker between 6 to 8, and in the morning between 6 to around 10. However, that alone has not been enough, because we have also been trying to look at the energy consumption, the amount of energy that each household is consuming. And I think that is somewhere where we still have a challenge, because the pressure cooker is either used with the lid open or closed. And our service provider is still working on trying to get it to be able to give us the cumulative energy consumption of a device, because of the keep warm mode that the pressure cooker always automatically sets itself to once the pressure has built up. So that part of the energy usage has not been very, very much developed to the level where we can comfortably say that this cooking event, the total energy was so much. And then also that duration when the the pressure goes into the warm mode, then it goes to zero. It doesn't peak any energy as it is expected. So I think that is still work in progress that we are seeing. However, the work of embedding the technology into the pressure cooker, that was successful. But the development of the technology so far using the IoT to give and provide all these data points is still, and it is something that is still being developed. I hope I've answered you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dorothy. Thank you for that insight. And probably building up on what Dorothy has said, like EPCs can be used when lead is open or when lead is closed. And there is still a bit of work to be done in terms of the EPC being able to distinguish, or rather the IoT system being able to distinguish the cooking events and even the loads thereof. And so this probably brings also the issue of crediting carbon credits. And so I want to pose this question to either Mr. Ian or Geoffrey, and ask that that overcrediting has severely impacted the market price and the reputation of clean cooking carbon credits, that is. And so how does your DMV system leverage the very granular data patterns to reliably distinguish legitimate EPC cooking events from misusage, to ensure that at least there is high integrity, at least that the high integrity necessary for the price premium when we're looking at cooking with these appliances?
Thank you very much. Ian Mutai from Vast Carbon. I think I'll take that one. So at least what we've done so far is that we've been able to digitize a couple of devices ranging from both EPCs, induction cook stoves, having two sets of meters, internal meters and external meters, similar to what the smart plug is. Carbon credits are very sensitive markets. Carbon markets are really sensitive markets, and reputation is a big concern, at least in this market. So the issues of accrediting come by when the data is not accurate and when you're not able to account fully for how you then were able to compute your emission reductions. The whole essence of digital monitoring is to reduce this, or to actually alleviate the concerns that come with integrity of the data that is transmitted. And how this is done is through, of course, setting up the digital meters that are on the device. So it's a device level metering that captures cooking events or even cooking as it happens. How we've done it at Vast Carbon is that we have integrated our IoT with the EPCs and induction cook stoves, and we have almost a 5-minute data transmission. The frequency is about every 5 seconds that the data is actually then transmitted to a cloud. This raw form data is stored in a ledger that is immutable for the sake of understanding further what and even diagnosing issues of anomalies and whatnot. So what we've done at Vast Carbon, just to make sure that we're very, very safe in terms of the integrity of the data, is to have the raw form data transmitted every 5 seconds, sent into a ledger that we can then audit further in case there's any anomaly that we are sensing from that particular front. In the event that there are anomalies, we have been able to come up with anomaly detection systems. What Dorothy from Nyalore was talking about earlier is very, very true, such that, I mean, the cooking habits and the device patterns are very different from one device to the next, from one consumer to the next. What we've realized from the data that we've seen is that the people who would actually plug in their EPC and leave it on throughout, the people who will maybe boil, I know a use case where someone actually boiled githeri and they left it for a week. It was a bachelor who left it for a week, and they were just coming to serve it, have the meal, and then they'd continue. So if you look at this in a normal eye, it may appear to be an anomaly, but then it needs a lot of analysis of exactly what potentially could be happening there to understand what the trends are. And out of the lessons that we've learned over the few years that we've been implementing this, we've now been able to come up with a more refined algorithm that understands anomalies better, and we're able to tell the edge cases better than we were earlier. What we've now done within the anomaly detection system as well is to create a mechanism to treat and to document. As I said, integrity is very, 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 very critical to maintain the right premium in terms of the carbon credits, and just to avoid any issues of any reputation risk. So in the event that there are anomalies, then there's a mechanism that we have created to treat these anomalies, and to also document the reason why these particular records were modified before it's then committed into the claim-ready evidence. So these have been some of the things that we've learned over time. It's been through actually doing this that we've learned that some of it's not a straight line, and it's not a one size fits all solution that would go, but it needs to, and you need to get the nuances of at least a particular sort of segment of users, and also be very specific on the type of device. So those are the learnings that we've been able to gather so far, and I think we're well into developing a sort of a very elaborate way to determine some of the smaller things like the cooking events. Of course, there's a cost implication, and there's a challenge with, of course, getting the telemetry coming every 5 seconds. But at this very early stage, it's useful for purposes of getting everything right, and then upon when it gets to the scale up, then some of this so the frequencies can be reduced. You can get the data within a longer span, and some of those interventions may reduce the cost. But at least what we've done for now was to make sure that we're getting as much learnings as possible from this particular engagement, and getting to refine how we handle the data. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ian, for that. That's quite elaborate. And I can imagine the bachelor. And so moving on, building onto what Ian has said, just to go back a bit, he's mentioned that there are some algorithms they have set into place that ensures that data streams onto the platform at least every 5 seconds. The kind of documentations that Vast Carbon has, and also the analysis framework that they have put in place just to be able to pick up the data anomalies that may come into the system that may be registered as data is being collected. And so building up onto that, I'd like to ask Nora or Paul that in your thought as you're moving into phase 3 of the study that you're currently undertaking, what do you think would be some of the either behavioral or technical interventions that could help to mitigate decline in usage, and also ensure sustained user engagement, which could also be very vital in maximizing verified carbon savings and increasing carbon credit revenues per device, probably per user?
We'll go with that, Nora. Yeah, cool. So one of the things that was highlighted to us from, I suppose, external parties reading the report, and it's something that's certainly worth clarifying. So we definitely saw a fairly large drop-off in usage, or sorry, data collection from the start of the trial through the process, and fairly critically that is almost definitely attributed to a hardware failure is probably a strong word, but just the connectivity not being able to send data. What was identified as we collected the hardware after the trial was that we did one last plug-in that wasn't included in the reporting because we couldn't at that point verify that the usage was definitely from EPCs, because it could have been moved around in the period that it wasn't communicating. But what we did see in almost every case was that the plugs continued to count that total energy usage. And that's fundamentally what we need, is we need that total energy usage. So the tech continued to work. customers still continue to interact and continue to use the EPCs. And our surveys backed that up. Most of the clients would have said that they continue to use the EPCs without issue, despite us not seeing the data come in on the back end. So, you know, that shows that customers are happy to interact with these things, despite those kind of pieces of feedback that LEDs were using energy and they didn't like various bits and pieces plugged in. What was typically happening was that people were plugging it in. So, you know, just the same as almost every kitchen, you don't want things always out. You want to put them away. So it's solving for that solution. So get rid of the LEDs so that people aren't concerned about energy usage. Tie the solution up in some manner that keeps its generic form factor, so it can be applicable to many appliances, but don't allow customers to remove it in some. And we're speculating various ways of doing it, whether it sits in the cable, whether it sits in some sort of smart plug wrap, or there's various ways we're looking at achieving that. So, you know, we saw that customers are very happy with the solution. We saw that they were happy to use it. If we address those issues in the hardware, which doesn't feel like a heavy lift based on discussions with manufacturers, we keep the generic form factor, we address those small issues that customers identified, and I think we will get to a solution that customers are quite happy with. And then going forward, it's then about how much a customer wants to interact with the device. So if you then have a customer that has a smartphone, we would then, through this smart plug solution, be in a position to potentially share them that data through an app of some sort that then could be extended to giving them insights about usage, and then suddenly it becomes a much more interesting interaction for customers, because you may end up being able to get more accurate, or sorry, more frequent data in that sense as well. Does that, Nora, have I missed? No, cool.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So still building up on the issue of carbon credits, this is probably to Geoffrey or Ian, where reports have shown that carbon benefits are rarely shared with the end users, and therefore there are cases where there is witnessing of low engagement. Beyond simply generating carbon credits, how do you design the IoT dashboard and reporting mechanism to facilitate the active sharing of progress, usage data, and direct financial incentives with the end users, particularly directed to the end users, so as to enhance things like loyalty and also to encourage the adoption of the eCooking appliances?
I think I'll go again. So Geoffrey, please, you may proceed. I think I can come after you.
Okay, so just to touch a bit on the integrity side of things, I just wanted to say that I think I was almost gonna cross paths with Ian as well, but happy to share the platform. So I believe there's a lot that's being discussed here that I believe we have solved for, and it would be good to just maybe, if possible, do some demos. If you're interested in buying our tech, would be happy to do that. But we've solved a lot of the problems you're facing since we've been doing this maybe for 3 to 4 years. So whether it's cooking events, logging those, whether it's where the cooker board should lie, whether it's inside or outside, I believe, accuracy. So we've done a lot of things on tracking time and date, with modules in the board, having encrypted storage to make sure we are able to make sure data is integral. And I guess one of the other things we are looking to add is a blockchain layer to make sure that we can then make sure that the data sits on a ledger that is immutable, which is a very good feature that Ian is currently using. So on to the benefit sharing. One of the things that we've designed into our current project design is sharing incentives through energy tokens. So we have been experimenting with sharing energy sort of incentive based on usage. So rather than share cash, you provide kilowatt hours. Consumers who are using, more power than others. So that's one of the key things that we are looking at, sort of scaling. And then, of course, upfront with carbon finance, I believe you can provide benefits of sort of a subsidized cost for cookers, where carbon finance is available for that, so that that benefit then makes it cheaper for a customer to acquire the device. So there are different ways this can be done. But in terms of encouraging usage, we've been more focused on incentivizing usage through provision of additional tokens for consumers who are utilizing our cookers. So trying to make sure that when you use the cooker a certain number of times in a month, then you get a certain number of benefit based on how many kilowatt hours you've used. And so we're also experimenting with this with a mini grid developer, just to see how that could increase usage on their mini grid in terms of cooking and productive use other than just cooking. But that is the, sort of the mechanisms that we are thinking, could encourage people to cook more. And we believe that that probably reinforces electric cooking behavior because you're incentivizing the exact, thing that is using the energy, from the cooker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. I think let me also just join in the submission, and I think I agree with you that incentives are critical, at least to drive up the adoption of the adoption of this of clean cooking, and even to garner more carbon credits. The dynamic here is that the more people cook, the more you're able to get more carbon credits, and it plays out even for the other different, like the sector, the utilities are able to save more power. But from a carbon perspective, the more you cook, the more then people are able to get more credits. So I think it's imperative that there is a need for carbon revenue sharing to both accelerate the adoption of this, and also to make sure that the consumer also gets a fair share of the benefit. How we've done this is that we have a digital monitoring, reporting, and verification platform that is project proponent facing. A project proponent is a person who basically develops the carbon project, and within this context, you have the ability to set your benefit sharing ratio. So if you'd wish to do maybe 10% of the benefits to be shared to the community, the system will automatically then pick that up. We have two pathways of sharing benefits, which is a cash benefits through, of course, M-Pesa. That's what we've done integrations for right now, and token and using tokens. The challenge with tokens is that KPLC recently stopped the purchase of third-party purchases of tokens, and it's now only done through either KPLC directly or banks, and that has posed a challenge, at least in the sense of automating that. We are currently having discussions with Safaricom to see how that can be done as well, with the T4D, the technology for development teams, to get that to be digitalized so that it can be seamless. It doesn't need to require human intervention, but as it is now, it does require a bit of human intervention, at least to share the tokens as benefits. Another thing that has been a glaring concern as well has been through the life cycle of a carbon project is that you get the credits after the activity, the mitigation activity has been done, meaning that the project proponent will only realize the benefits of, rather be able to get the credits and even sell it after the individual has cooked. So this then poses a challenge, at least on the project proponent, in such that they would need to, if they need to share this benefit ahead of time to incentivize consumption, that they need to sort of get that out of pocket before the credits are issued, and then have that potentially shared down with the consumer. So those are some of the things that we've been able to pick out and learn. There are instruments such as forward purchases, where some of the participants or the project proponents would go for forward purchases, where they sell the credits ahead of time. That gives them a bit of liquidity to be able to sustain some things like this incentive programs. But I think it's a catch-22 on that particular regard. But of course, what also data is showing is that with more benefits going to the consumer, then there's more consumption happening, and also that then means more credits because of higher consumption. Thanks.
Thank you both for that. It's good to know that there are ways in which consumption can be tracked, and also it's encouraging that there are methods, either as incentives, as token, or even M-Pesa, that is trickled down to the participants to at least encourage usage, and also within the carbon credits market, just to ensure transparency from both sides. Thank you for that. Still continuing with the issue of uptake of clients, and this goes to Ms. Dorothy. General impact from the work you have done suggests that PayGo method of enabling clients to afford appliances, of course, through facilitated IoT monitoring, has actually helped the consumers in addressing the high upfront costs of appliances. That is one of the major concerns when it comes to adoption. And so how does Nyalore Impact utilize its partnership that you have with Equity Bank to structure financing solutions that leverage the IoT element of monitoring, and at the same time managing the risk that is prone to happen, where clients will be sort of defaulting to make payments?
Thank you, Karen. I think the agreement that we had with Equity Bank was for them to provide consumer financing through their groups that operate under a savings and loaning scheme, where the group, each member guarantees the other. And so the bank would pay for the product upfront, but then they have their own interest rate that they add to the principal amount. So our PayGo has just come in to give to the Equity Bank groups an alternative affordability method where they could acquire this product, where in the case of maybe the group has defaulters, and so one member, though they can qualify for the loan, but given that there are defaulters within the group, they are not able to take the loan, and also just poor performing groups. So our PayGo appliances came in to increase the options that a member would have of acquiring a product. If they cannot acquire through the Equity Bank loan, then they can take through our PayGo model, where we did not very much, I must say this, we did not very much concentrate on the PayGo part of the technology solution. We were more keen on collecting data at the moment. So I may not have any more much to share about the PayGo and the technology that has been provided so far. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dorothy. The communal approach is very thoughtful and very interesting. We're almost coming to a close, and anyone with a question We will get back to the questions in just a bit. And so we want to move on to the next element of discussion, and this is to Nora or Paul. In your presentation, you said that the MiFi dongles are not commercially scalable. And I want to pose a question and ask, in the coming phase 3, how will the proposed primary connectivity method, that is the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth that will be used, help to address the documented challenges of connectivity, interruptions, issues of power cycling, and thus the device resets, while also at the same time avoiding the prohibitive upfront and recurrent costs associated with the GSM modules?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So like that's what we found in particular is that generally the hardware for GSM is generally more expensive, particularly in areas like Africa where the 2G network is expected to be turned off in the course of the next, although I don't think a fixed date has been specified for that. But you're having to go to more expensive modem solutions to be able to ensure connectivity. And then, as we're all aware, the ongoing costs, regardless of usage, typically of GSM solutions. So what we're now looking at, so we're working with manufacturers on the hardware to address the issues we've seen, and generally speaking, they're very receptive to that. Solutions have already been proposed, and thankfully it looks like it may actually be in certain cases just firmware adjustments that need to be looked at. From that point, then we're looking at how we secure the device within some point, whether it's inside the cook stove, which makes it complicated because then you're looking at modification of the cook stove. Some of the applications we were aiming for may not have the space for that. So we're wanting to keep it as generic. So inside the appliance is proving to be difficult if you want to continue to make it generic. So then you're looking at whether you put it into the cable or you put it at the end of the plug, and then secure it in some form that you then know that usage is continuously with the appliance it was assigned to. We're then also looking at adjustments within the firmware to be able to prove that further when you come and do that data collection. So then at that point, a lot of projects seem to be where you don't need that continuous data stream as long as you can have the assurance that the data or the energy usage is from the appliance. So you get to a point where you can collect data maybe once every 3 months, every 6 months, or even every 12 months. And you're just looking at that total energy usage, again, as long as you have the security of the energy coming from the appliance. You can then start to build in validation of that. So whether it be photos of the connection entirety once it's deployed, you may consider taking a photo of it so you have the proof that it was installed correctly. And then when you're collecting the data, if that has been tampered with, then unfortunately you would be in a position where you'd have to throw out the data because it has been tampered with and you couldn't prove. And that's something that would need to be communicated to customers. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're focusing on at the moment, is keeping the solution at the lower end of cost so it's more commercially scalable. And then looking at where it's positioned from a security perspective to ensure accuracy and trueness of the data.
Thank you for that, Paul. Nora, you want to add anything?
No, thank you. I think Paul's covered it.
Okay, thank you so much. So as we sort of bring the panel discussion to a close, I'd like to pose this to Ian and Geoffrey. In the Kenyan household context, what are some of the opportunities and challenges that exist in scaling up smart metered EPC initiatives? One of you could take challenges, the other could take the opportunities.
I think challenges is easier. So I think Ian will deal with the opportunities. Anyway, I believe one of the challenges that we've had is the additional cost that the technology layer brings to to that. And I guess that is a big one that Nora and Paul are trying to tackle here. So we've really focused on bringing down the cost of our technology as well. And I believe it's pretty much competitive with what they are proposing at the moment. But that is a big issue because once you increase the cost of the cooker, then people's ability to pay becomes an issue since many of them are trying to get this actually through credit. And that is where most of the B2Bs are focused. So that's a challenge. So I guess it's up to all of us to think of how we solve for that. And in creative ways, maybe use carbon finance as well as a lever to take care of IoT costs and the like. So I believe connectivity is also another one. The cost of data, ongoing data transmission. So that also adds to the cost of the cooker for operations and everything. So I think for me, I found price sensitivity is a very critical one. And I say that if your cooker is being sold for more than what it is going for on River Road, then the entire business may be having a challenge trying to get people to buy the appliances.
Thanks, Geoffrey, and you've left me to address the harder part. I'll try and give it a shot. But yeah, what are some of the opportunities that are presenting itself through some, at least from the challenges that we are looking at? I agree that the cost is one of the biggest challenges. The cost of digitalization is extremely inhibitive if you're to capture all the data points that you need at least to inform user behavior and also use it for carbon. I also agree that the cost of the transmission of the data, which is the connectivity, is also very, very high. If you're looking at it just to paint the picture, if you look at some of the IoT providers, they'll charge about $1 a month to transmit data. That same $1 a month, if you look at it from a year, that's about $12. And you're looking at the very best. If you're to get 2 credits from a cook stove, you're talking about $20 to $24. So you're ceding half of that to just connectivity. So those are some of the glaring concerns, at least if you go with the GSM mode, and it doesn't make a lot of sense even with carbon. However, what opportunities present, at least with this? One of the biggest opportunities that I'm seeing here is with if you get enough devices online and with scale up, then there's a lot of data that comes with this. This data is very useful in driving adoption and in even sectoral insights that would help people like the utilities even to make more informed decisions as to how to probably lower the tariff or come up with a price, a tariff that is sensitive to eCooking, understand the impact on the grid. So there's a data play that I think we often don't look at, but which again becomes very, very important in helping to drive adoption of eCooking across board. We've not explored any pricing model to such data, but I believe that there could be mechanisms then to even get monetary value from data. So it's a hard shot, but it is one of the opportunities. Another thing that we've been exploring actively is to figure out a way to reduce leverage carbon finance to sort of reduce the burden of digitalization and digitalization and the connectivity. How we are thinking about this is to work with the right partners to come up with a revolving fund that would be targeted to just doing the digitalization, such that then the project developers or the consumer doesn't have to take this cost upfront. It goes into basically, for example, we would be able to digitize, for example, Nyalore's cook stoves without incurring the additional cost. And once the carbon revenues then come back, it's plowed back to the fund to be able to sort of get more devices digitalized in a revolving manner, and I think that would help to bring issues up to actually guarantee scale if managed very well and with the right partners. So it's a conversation that is ongoing that we're happy to have with whoever would want to engage in this particular front. But we see that as an opportunity, and we see that as a big mechanism to reduce at least the upfront cost of this without necessarily compromising the quality of the data, because you realize something like GPS locations is also very crucial for carbon credits. But without this data, then it means if you strip that down to reduce the cost, you may be also compromising at least the quality of the data set that you present for carbon credit claims. Another obvious, of course, opportunity would be PayGo. If you get a very sound model to then distribute the cook stoves within a pay-as-you-go model, then that would make a lot of sense. Again, the implication is that it will not work with a stripped-down version of the smart meter, because with PayGo you have to introduce things like tamper proofing, where you get alerts if there's a tamper. You need to be able to enable things like remote disconnection in cases non-payment, and those add to the cost of the smart meter, despite the fact that it actually brings a benefit of reducing the cost, the initial money that someone would require to sort of get the device. It does increase the cost of the thing overall, but still it presents as an opportunity in my eye. So those are the ones that could come to that I could quickly then wrap my hand around. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian and Geoffrey, for the remarks on opportunities and challenges. And so at this time, I want to pass it back to Cyprus. Thank you so much to facilitate the Q&A session with our panelists.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. Very, very critical discussion that was. And I think we have gathered more insights. I think the panel session was really necessary for us to be able to get more information from Nora and Paul. And of course, Geoffrey, Ian and Dorothy. I think, your insights are really important because also they speak into Kenyan context. So I've seen a lot of exchange on the chat, and I think it's a sign that this was really an interesting discussion. Of course, Stuart firing back with questions, and I've seen Simon providing some feedback. I've also seen some questions that were not answered, but before I highlight those, my colleague John, Dr. John Leary, is also on the call. I don't know if you like to also contribute to this discussion. And then also Simon is really interested in this kind of discussions, especially around IoT-enabled e-cooking appliances. He's like a pioneer of this e-cooking technologies or rather research in itself. So if they are okay to also just maybe speak to the discussion, just say something, and then we can see if the panel will be able to answer the few questions that were not responded to, because also I think a lot of them have already been responded to. Yeah, so John or Dr. Simon, Dr. John, whoever is able to speak.
John, go ahead. I think it's good discussion. Had a nice little chat with Stuart on the chat. I think the price point is a key thing. I think the ongoing monthly data charges is an issue that we could do with more discussion about. I'm very aware that somebody raised the blockchain side of things. It's about verification of the data. Particularly, I know that CAVEX is working towards a platform that will enable carbon projects to be set up more easily. And one of the things that they will need is to know that between the appliance and it arriving at their platform, nobody has interfered with the data, just artificially, upped it by 10% or whatever. Sorry, I'm distracted because I generally tell a story at this point. I used to play video games with a mate of mine and do little sort of fights with tanks and everything. And one day I worked out how to hack into the game and increase the speed of my tanks by 10%. Whereas previously we were equal, suddenly I started winning. Yeah, so there are opportunities, particularly, you can get some really clever people, and I don't count myself as a really clever person. So even I could hack into something and give myself an advantage. And I think that is where the blockchain and the verification come in, which we haven't had much discussion about, but that also is a very important aspect of all of this. Sorry, I'm waffling, so I wasn't expecting to speak. So I'm going to hand over to John.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm on the road, so the reception might not be great.
Yeah, we've got you, John.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I just want to say a big thank you to Cypros and Karen for convening what was a really exciting dialogue. I think the vibrancy of the discussion in the chat shows just how important a topic this is. And it's very timely for the study that Karen is leading on IoT and the role that can play in utility billing. So I think there was a really important point that was made by Ian, which is about developing multiple revenue streams for the data, because it seems that even just one alone, as lucrative as carbon markets may seem to us, may not be sufficient to maintain the hardware and the data transmission and curation costs. So I think that's a really important element to look at, looking at who's involved in that chain and how can they be incentivized to ensure that the good quality data is collected and shared. I think from the utility side, we'd initially started very much with a focus on integrating data on appliance level consumption into utility billing to be able to do customized tariffs. But I feel like that aspect of simply data sharing is something that we want to put greater emphasis on going forward. Who pays for access to that data? The utility themselves may want to just see the data, even if it's not to use it for billing. I think that's an equally important and critical part of this, especially in the early days. If the utility really wants to see that data, would they be willing to pay the companies that have shelled out for the hardware and the data transmission costs to be able to see that? We've discussed that as an element of results-based financing programs, which tend to focus very much on the initial sale of the appliance. But really, there's this new value chain that's emerging from RBF and similar programs, where it's about the sustained use of the appliances and the proof of that sustained use, which is something that is critical to both carbon and results-based financing programs. There's also the alignment that was discussed by, I think, multiple people on the call between the increasing usage of the appliance and the increasing carbon credits and the increasing usage and the increasing electricity sales. So that synergy between the utilities motivation and the carbon developers motivation. So I really think there's a key axis here that we should focus on in this study on the value of IoT right now in appliance level metering, to look at how we incentivize and finance that data sharing, because it's something that's useful for many different actors, but how do we ensure that the people that are getting value from it are able to contribute to the development and scaling of that infrastructure? So hopefully it stayed clear enough for you to hear that relatively small contribution. Let me pass back to Cypros, and hopefully we can unpack a few of those comments that have come out of the chat but have not yet been answered.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, those are really useful insights, Simon and John. And yeah, contribution towards this discussion is really important because you've been like a key stakeholder in the e-cooking sector, and you've literally speared some of the direction, some of the studies that have been done in the Kenyan space have taken. So your contribution is really valued. So looking at time, we're over time, but I think it's important that we respond to some of the questions so that we don't leave them hanging. So from the discussions on the chat, I see a lot of questions from Stewart were answered. I don't think we need to go to that, but Samia had a question for Paul regarding what was the lower green hill in the first quadrant for 4 amperes and 100 something. So Samia, I don't know if you're still on this call and you'd like to voice your own question, but Paul, if you were able to also see that question on the chat, maybe you could respond to Samia. And while you are doing that, there was also a question from Jimmy. I'm trying to trace it. So Jimmy was asking what was the cost for the smart plug plus GSM module. I think you can also respond to that. And then I would also like to give, there's a question from Kenneth, and we also have Vincent. So the two of you, if you're still on this call, probably you can just raise your hand up and ask that as Paul responds to the other questions. So Paul, take it up.
Yeah, no problem. What I might do is just share that graph again, because it's easier to address. Nora, can you nod if you're seeing my screen? Yeah, cool, fantastic. So what you'll see within the data points that we collected through the process is a lot of the usage was very much focused around when we were seeing energy usage, the 4 amps, 1,000 watts, which you tend to expect. Now the slight variations in that were typically voltage across various households. But what we did see, and this was the custom firmware that we ended up putting onto the device, was that the device reported usage, or sorry, increased the frequency of communication at the point where usage was detected. So all these points, which I think was the question was referring to, was why are you seeing a lot of 1,000 watt 0 amp usage? And what we were seeing within the data is that when the cook stove was turned on and started cooking, we would see a very instantaneous point where reported power was high, but there was no current. Or vice versa as it was turning off. I think it was that way. So, but that would only be 1 second. So in the point where it was turned on, you would have at 0 seconds, nothing. At 1 second, you would have this instantaneous power reading without any current. And then that second number 2, you would see it go up to this point, which was the data sampling at 4 amps and 1,000 watts. And that would continue until it was, so whatever the setting may be, 15, 20 minutes of cooking. You wouldn't hear from the cook stove or from the smart plug because it would continue cooking. And then as soon as the cook stove would reach pressure and temperature, you would see it drop down. And again, we would see that either 0 amp 1,000 watts or vice versa. And actually, interestingly, that aided in the signature of the EPCs and the ability to detect and know it was definitely cooking events. Because we could see that signature occurring. In terms of cost, then the smart plugs, because they're an off-the-shelf item, they came at a very attractive price. I think it was $8 we paid in the initial instance. There was obviously cost involved, so it's a different example when you're dealing with a trial of 100, because I was personally programming firmware, calibrating them, etc., etc. Beyond that, and even in a further trial of only 100, manufacturers are quite willing to flash a custom firmware directly, make sure newer devices now are auto-calibrating, so we don't have that challenge either. So cost-wise, because they're an off-the-shelf item, because you're not customizing the hardware, you're looking at potentially a Xworks price out of China of around $4, $5, $6, something in that region. So then by the time you get it into Kenya with shipping, etc. But this is only a small device, so shipping wouldn't be expensive either. And that's where we get to the point of saying it would definitely be sub $10. The dongle, because we only bought 100 from Safaricom, I think they ended up being $25 each, and then $1 a month for the SIM connectivity. That's not something we intend on doing in future solutions, because we're aiming for that solution that isn't constantly connected. I think that happy to address any other questions if that doesn't clarify.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Paul, for that. I think Samia and Jimmy are on the call. And yeah, if in case you have any more clarifications you need, I think we will also share the report and also the, maybe I need to confirm with Paul if I can share the presentation as well, for those who want a more synthesized version. Hello.
Sorry guys, my meeting just froze as I finished there, so I may have missed any follow-up, but
Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry, I actually thought it was me. I was saying for anybody who needs more information with regards to this topic, we will share the report on email. The recording will be shared for those who joined late, and also I was checking with you, Paul, if I could share the slides alongside those.
yeah, absolutely no problem. Yeah.
All right, great. So I see Vincent is on the call. Vincent, would you like to just ask your question briefly, please? And then also Kenneth, if you could do the same shortly, and then we can close. Go on, Vincent.
Sorry, just realized that my mic was on when I rejoined. Sorry, no question at the moment.
All right, okay. So yeah, I'll send Paul the other questions you posted on the chat. Do we have Richard?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
go on.
I'm also from 4RD. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting my question. Yeah, there was talk about some use of blockchain. It's a really interesting technology and it gets mentioned a lot. I think Jeffrey mentioned it, that they were looking to use it in their solution. What I'm interested in is how they see if they see any issues with scalability, if they're putting every single device event on a blockchain, particularly if it's every 5 seconds or highly frequent. Is there any cost implications to that? And yeah, are they anticipating using an off-the-shelf blockchain like Ethereum, or are they building their own? So those are the questions I had there specifically for Jeffrey.
Thank you. Richard, Jeffrey, would you like to respond to those?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess on chain, we are looking probably to just sort of store proof rather than draw data. So we are looking at maybe timestamp, things like device ID, verifier signature. Of course, we want to also have the standard, sort of the compliance standard that's been used. Keep it very light because of costs, definitely. So that is what we are planning to do. I don't know. Your other question was about?
It was mostly around. It was around blockchain and the use of, because it's something we've looked at, and we use immutable ledgers for some of our data, but we don't. Putting every single device message on a blockchain, just I mean, I'd love to know someone that's doing that and making it work, but it doesn't seem to. I'm struggling with that idea.
Yeah, so I to be honest, so I'm not the technical blockchain developer in the company, but I know that what the technique that she's employing is to look at proving like thousands of events in one sort of storage instance. So that is the whole idea. But if we take everything up, I believe it cannot be sustainable cost-wise. And of course, yeah, we are looking at putting this on Ethereum. So that is we are not looking to develop our own
So that's
platform.
interesting. Sorry, without trying to prolong it, you think that you might be grouping together thousands of events and putting that onto a block, making a block on the blockchain out of thousands of events rather than every single event?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I saw Ian's hand up, so Ian, you can chip in.
Oh, yeah, but I think because we've tried it out ourselves, and yeah, I agree that the cost of putting every message there would be extremely inhibitive. The transaction fees would be extremely high. So what we've done is we are batching them. So you have to batch them and then send it to the on chain only maybe once in a day, as opposed to having every session send it there. Again, there are two blockchains. There's a public blockchain that offers a lot more in terms of transparency and whatnot, but then there's also the permissioned and the private blockchains like the Hyperledger Fabric that we've also played with, which of course doesn't incur a lot in terms of the transaction costs. So we've tried it out, and I think if you batch it, there's something there. If you send every record there, it's gonna be a bit of a nightmare.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions on the chat. But yeah, so thank you, Paul, for that. Okay. Yeah, so Samia will reach out to you privately, bilaterally for any questions he has on his side. But yeah, from my side, I think I just want to say thank you to everyone for contributing in this really highly timely conversation. I think the conversations around providing data, especially to the users, has been there for a while. And I think even for MECS, what we had done before was do a number of comparative analysis around different cooking technologies and just providing this data in terms of reports or leaflets or all that. But I think if we are able to give the user an opportunity to see for themselves the amount of energy they're using while cooking in their home at home without necessarily having to go through research to get that information, I think that is really useful, and it's a good way to sort of entice them or rather incentivize them in a way to see the benefits of cooking with these technologies that are more efficient and time-saving. So I think the work that we're doing is really great. A lot of it seems to be still like a work in progress, which is usually the case with a lot of studies that we do around new innovative technologies and all that. So I think a lot of pilots are still needed, and it's great that a lot of the stakeholders here are working around the clock to come up with solutions that are going to help us have something that is really able to be something that can be adopted within the e-cooking sector and within with the stakeholders in general. So so I hope for those who are still have like pilots in store that are upcoming, some things on the pipeline. This is an encouragement that we need to keep doing a lot of studies around this so that by the end of it all, we have something for the sector, and also for us to be able to also utilize the carbon credits, as Simon has mentioned. This is really important for us, because we need to provide the numbers for us to be able to benefit from those kind of financial opportunities. So with that said, I think also my colleagues have talked more about what MECS is doing from our side. And so we like to end it there, and we will share the recordings for this session. We will also share the documents that Paul and Nora shared with us. And yeah, in case of any other materials that we come across around this, we'll also share. So look out for that on the Gamos YouTube channel, which I've sent on the chat. For those who have not joined the eCooking community of practice, a lot of this discussion happens there actually in real time, and many more beyond just this. So also feel free to use the link on the chat to join that group. Otherwise, I would like to say thank you again to our panel, our presenters, for those great insights. That was really needed discussion, and we are thankful that Kenya is part of the people that are changing the narrative. So thank you so much.
Thank you.